Little did we know when we planned to feature forestry in South Carolina in this episode that much of the world would come to know us because of the devastating Highway 31 wildfires near Myrtle Beach on Carolina's eastern shore. That fire burned more than 19,000 acres, consumed 70 homes, and damaged more than 100 others. And over the course of the week-long fire, more than 4,000 people were evacuated from their homes, proving that uncontrollable flames and forests can make for a deadly mix. That's a key concern of people like South Carolina Forestry Commission's fleet manager, Doug Mills.
Always have water around, a good water supply, water hose, buckets or some sort. Always clear around the debris if you're burning it. It's good, for instance, just like what I did with that plow. I took away the fuel from the fire. And if they can do that around a pile of debris, that keeps the fire contained. And always watch it, always keep an eye on it. And if anything, the weather changes or the fire begins to get too hot on them or anything like that, just stop what you're doing. Try to put it out. If not, call the fire department. They'll be happy to come out and take care of it before it gets out of hand.
State forestry officials in South Carolina, like officials in most other states, are willing and able to help citizens plan and execute prescribed burns in and around forest land. But for all of the devastating news we often hear about fires and forests, there's much more positive news in the balance about the positive impact forests have on the nation's economy and on the environment. Look closely at the topography of South Carolina, and you'll see that more than 2/3 of the state is forest land. Of that, about 88% is privately owned and managed. The remaining forests are state or federally managed. Hodge Harmon is a farmer and retired forester who still holds a passion for trees.
A forest is a crop that it has to be nurtured over a long period of time, anywhere from 30 to 40 years. So you're planting a forest today for our generations of tomorrow, and my grandchildren and their children.
Harmon believes the world is better because of well-managed forests and forest land. And if the economy is any indication, he has good reason to think so. A recent study shows that forestry, when combined with farm-related business in South Carolina, is the state's largest economic engine. Agribusiness is responsible for contributing about $34 billion to the state's economy each year and creating about 200,000 jobs. Nearly a quarter of those jobs are in the forest industry. Timber from forest operations is the #1 harvested crop, with forestry products from South Carolina generating $1 billion in exports annually. With more than 2/3 of the state's land in forests, it's no wonder most farmers also own stands of timber, like peach and row crop farmer Chal Carr, who says you really don't see one without the other, especially here in the South.
Whether you're a forest producer or you're a farmer, we're the best stewards of the land, taking care of the land, and all of us are providing an economic value to this state. And being combined with them to be recognized for that industry combined together is the #1 industry in South Carolina can only help us go forward in terms of getting state legislature monies, recognition from the consumers and the public on just what a vital role we play in South Carolina.
In addition to the economic benefits of forestry, forests also help protect and preserve the environment, purifying water, cleaning the air, providing shade and shelter, and providing habitat for wildlife. Gene Kadama is the state forester with the South Carolina Forestry Commission.
Decades ago, most owners of forest land would be buying it for timber and for the timber production that you can come off of it. But that's changed a lot, with a lot of landowners now buying it more for the recreational aspects, the wildlife, then the quality of life of getting out and enjoying the track. And the timber is almost secondary sometimes, and the timber allows them to own the track, to enjoy these other attributes of the track. They can manage the timber, create cash flow, they can have some leases on it perhaps, and that creates cash flow to allow them to enjoy all those other aspects of your theoretical 200-acre tract or 1,000 or whatever it might be.
There are basically two types of forests in South Carolina: those unmanaged areas where trees grow naturally and randomly, and actual tree farms where trees are planted specifically for the purpose of growing a crop for harvest and transition into the value-added products. Both are important. Each benefits the environment, but the latter provides more of an investment to the landowner or forest manager and is more closely related to traditional agriculture.
Timber is a crop. It's harvested just like corn is harvested, but it just takes longer to grow it. And you have to make additional accommodations, whereas corn would be harvested and the entire field is harvested, though in agriculture you do leave buffer areas and wildlife areas and water areas too, but it's just a little bit different. And one of the things that would bother people, and it bothers me, is it takes so long for it to come back. When you harvest something, 20, 30 years, in some cases 40 or 50 years to get back to what you saw. But what you have to realize that a lot of what you're looking at, even here, this used to be ag land we're sitting on right here. It's their forest here now, but back when the colonists were here and in the 1800s, it was all agriculture. So it will come back to forest over time. It's just that a forester, his job or her job is to manage that and do it in a way that the landowner would like to see it done and the way that society would like to see it done.
The common denominator is the soil, the land, and then the crops that are grown and produced from that land is what binds us all together. And I think if you look at farmers and foresters, we probably were the first true environmentalists. And we, to this day, continue to practice good forestry and good sound agriculture practices. And so it's in our best interest to protect the environment because we need to protect the soil, which in turn allows us to provide and grow crops to feed and clothe and house a nation.
Bob Scott is president of South Carolina Forestry Association and says another similarity between tree and traditional farmers is that both work hard to improve growth rates, yields, and production times.
The facts show that there are more trees growing today, more timber volume in South Carolina than there was in the mid-30s. And that's the reason for that is because we've been able to inform and educate landowners, foresters, as to the proper techniques for growing timber on smaller acreages, so we actually grow timber more intensely. And so consequently, we do have more timber today than we did 70 years ago. As a matter of fact, there's more timber in the country as a whole today than there was probably 300 years ago. So, and that's all attributed to what we call sustainable forestry. And that means you don't harvest any more than you grow. You keep it in balance. And as long as we can grow timber, harvest it, grow another crop, and harvest it, we'll have forest forever.
And while forestry results in one of the highest valued cash crops in South Carolina, it requires the most patience. In fact, some say it's really farming in slow motion. Award-winning South Carolina forester and tree farmer Edward Drayton says growing timber beats investing in the stock market.
A point that's not well known is that forestry, growing timber is one of the best investments that you can make. That when you look at it from an inflationary point of view or in a non-inflationary period, the return is equal or better to common stocks. Investments in stocks are so impersonal. Here, it's making you a return, and you get a lot of side benefits like the recreation, just riding over the property and absorbing the beauty of it, seeing wildlife, the animals, and the hawks, the occasional eagle, all of that just, and the aesthetics of the area just make it all, it's just icing on the cake.
The term tree farming became popular back in the 1940s when foresters were looking to tap into the goodwill and high profile of farmers and agriculture. Since then, multi-generational tree farm families have grown up around the country. And while it's important to pass the tradition of tree farming down through the generations, tree farmer Edward Drayton says it's also good to have multi-generational forests.
The fact is that trees get old and die. And it's not good, healthy demographics to have all old stands of timber, because they're very susceptible to disease, to high winds, and they just gradually become unhealthy and don't contribute. Whereas if you harvest some old stands, leaving plenty of old stands, but harvesting some, then you've got little babies coming along, and then you've got teenagers, and then you've got middle age, and so we need all ages, just like we do in the human population, and but a lot of people just can't stand to see a tree cut, but you've got to look at the big picture.
Among all the trees on Drayton's South Carolina farm, one stands out the most, Mr. Big.
Mr. Big is 34.5 inches in diameter at breast height. That's measured about right here. And it's 140 feet tall, and is 70 years old. And he's a beaut, and I wish I was in the shape that he's in.
So there you have it, forestry in South Carolina. A leading force in the state's economy, contributor to clean water and air, habitat to hundreds of wildlife species, and an investment for a lifetime. South Carolina's installment of Voices of Agriculture will continue in a moment.